I knew the night was going to hurt the moment I tried to sit down. Every breath sent a sharp stab through my ribs as I lowered myself into the chair at the Christmas table. My daughter, Emily, caught my eye and gave me that tight, polite smile people wear when they're barely holding it together. Across from me, my son-in-law Brandon lifted his wine glass and tapped it with his fork. "To Marcus," he announced loudly, grinning like he was on stage, still tough as nails. Even after that nasty tumble down the cottage stairs, a couple of people chuckled awkwardly. His smile never reached his eyes. "Guess the old man finally learned not to wander around in the dark, huh?" I gave him a small, stiff smile back, ignoring the fire in my chest. Let him think I'd slipped. Let him believe I was just some clumsy, aging father-in-law who got careless on an icy stair, because what Brandon didn't know was very simple. I hadn't fallen, and I could prove it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind about 3 weeks, to the moment this whole thing started. My name is Marcus Thornton. I'm 64 years old, retired after 36 years in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, 15 of those in major crimes. I've seen just about every way people hurt each other: homicides, domestic assaults, fraud, greed, desperation. You spend decades in that work, you stop being surprised, but you never stop noticing patterns. I thought retirement would be quiet. Mornings with coffee and the newspaper. Tending the garden my late wife, Margaret, loved so much. Maybe some fishing trips to the lake. Nothing dramatic. No bad guys. No crime scenes. Margaret died 2 years ago. Cancer, she fought it harder than anyone I've ever seen. And it still took her in the end. When she went, the house felt hollow, too big, too quiet. My world shrank down to one person, our daughter Emily. She's 32, a nurse at St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg. Smart, strong, compassionate, everything you hope your kid will grow up to be. She has Margaret's eyes, which is both a comfort and a knife to the chest some days. When she married Brandon 5 years ago, I wasn't thrilled. On paper, he looked fine, real estate developer. Big plans, always talking about the next project. In reality, there was a constant whiff of too much flash, not enough foundation. Expensive watches, nice truck, big talk. Money that never quite lined up with his actual income. But Emily loved him, and I kept my doubts to myself. You don't want to be the father who ruins your daughter's happiness because he doesn't like the guy's handshake. It was early December. I was in the workshop behind my house, sanding a bookshelf, when my phone buzzed. Emily's face filled the screen. "Hey, Dad," she said, a little too cheerful. "How are you?" "Not bad," I said, trying to remember why I thought building furniture at my age was a good idea. "What's going on?" She took a breath. "So, Brandon and I were talking. You haven't been up to the cottage since Mom passed. We thought maybe it'd be nice to go up for a weekend. Just the 3 of us. Get away from the city a bit. What do you think?" The cottage. We'd built that place 20 years ago on Lake Winnipeg. It was Margaret's dream, small, simple, surrounded by trees and water. Our escape. Our refuge. I hadn't set foot there since the funeral. Too many memories packed into those 4 walls. "I don't know, Em," I said slowly. "It's winter. Roads can be rough. The place isn't really set up for cold weather stays anymore." "Brandon already took care of it," she said quickly. "He had the heat turned on remotely, went up to check things. Everything's ready. It'll be good for you, Dad, please." There was something in her voice, a thin edge of strain. Not quite panic, but close. I wondered if things were rocky with Brandon and she wanted a neutral place to talk. A weekend at the lake didn't sound terrible, in theory. "When were you thinking?" I asked. "This weekend. We can drive up Friday, stay until Sunday. I'll make Mom's beef stew." That last part settled it. Margaret's stew had always been my favorite. "All right," I sighed. "Count me in." She lit up. "Perfect. Brandon will pick you up Friday around 2? Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo." When the call ended, a small knot of unease stayed behind in my chest. Maybe it was the cop in me. Maybe it was grief. Maybe both. Brandon suddenly helpful. Turning on the heat. volunteering to drive me up. He'd never shown much interest in the cottage. He always called it too far, too rustic, bad cell reception. I told myself not to overthink it. I should have listened to my instincts. Friday arrived cold and gray, Manitoba in full winter mode. I packed light warm clothes, my blood pressure meds, a book. At exactly 2 p.m., Brandon's black F-150 rolled up outside. He was alone. "Where's Emily?" I asked as I climbed in. "Got called into an emergency shift," he said, putting the truck in gear. "Pile up on the perimeter." She said to go ahead without her. She'd drive up tomorrow morning. "We could wait," I offered. "Go up together when she's off." He shook his head. She insisted. Didn't want to wreck the weekend. There was a tightness in his voice. Not the sound of a man simply disappointed. More like someone whose timetable had been shifted and didn't like it. We drove in silence for a while, snow hissing under the tires. "So," I said eventually, "how's the real estate game?" "Busy," he answered curtly. "Always busy. Got a few big projects in the pipeline." "Good to hear," I said. A few minutes later, he cleared his throat. "Actually, Marcus, speaking of projects, there's something I wanted to ask you about." There it was. "I've been looking at expanding into commercial properties," he said, eyes locked on the road. "Big returns, but I need capital to move fast." I thought, maybe you'd like to partner. Use some of your retirement funds. Help the family and make a solid profit at the same time. My internal alarm bells started ringing. "How much capital are you thinking?" I asked. "To get a meaningful share?" "Around 200,000. But it's basically a guaranteed 30 to 40% annual return, minimum. No legitimate investment guarantees 30 to 40%. Not in the real world. That's the kind of promise you see right before the handcuffs come out." "I'll think about it," I said. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Just don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't sit around forever." We turned off the highway and onto the gravel road leading to the cottage. Trees closed in, heavy with snow. The sun was already sinking, the sky shades of steel and dull orange. Brandon drove too fast for the conditions, the truck slipping on patches of ice. "Take it easy," I said. "We're not late for anything." He didn't slow down. By the time we reached the cottage, darkness had settled in. The place looked smaller than I remembered, more isolated. No neighbors in sight. No cell signal on my phone. So far. Exactly the kind of setting you don't want when your gut is already uneasy. "Grab your stuff. I'll get everything inside," Brandon said. "You can start a fire." Inside, the air was icy. So much for having the heat on. I turned the thermostat up and went to the fireplace. The wood bin beside it was empty. "Brandon, we need firewood," I called. Yeah. "I'll get it in a minute," he answered from the bedroom. "Just unpacking." I could hear him talking quietly, too quiet to make out words, but urgent. On the phone, while he still had a sliver of reception. No doubt, instead of arguing, I put my coat back on and went out myself. The woodshed was around the back, down a flight of wooden steps from the deck. Those stairs had been there since we built the place. Margaret used to nag me to replace them. I loaded my arms with wood and headed back up. That's when I saw it. The second step from the top had been cut most of the way through. Not rotten. Not cracked from age. Cut, fresh saw marks partially hidden under a light dusting of snow. One good step on that board and it would snap, sending whoever was on it backward down onto the frozen ground. I stopped. Heart T, U-D, I-N-G Dotney. I brushed the snow aside with my boot. Fresh sawdust clung to the edge. The cut was recent. Hours old, at most. I stepped over it carefully, went back inside, and dropped the wood beside the fireplace. "Stairs are in rough shape," I said, watching him. Second step's almost gone clean through. Nearly went out from under me. "We'll have to be careful." He glanced up from his bag, face blank. "Oh? Yeah, that's dangerous. I'll check it out tomorrow in daylight." He smiled. Too easily. Too fast. I'd interrogated a lot of people in my life. When someone's words say one thing and their eyes say another, you pay attention. "Good thing I noticed," I said quietly. He just nodded. That night I barely slept. The wind rattled the windows, and my mind kept replaying the same pieces. Emily suddenly insisting on a cottage trip, Brandon turning on the heat, offering to drive the hard sell on a can't-miss investment, the sawed-through stare, the dead phone lines, and lack of cell coverage. A picture was forming, and it looked ugly. In the morning, Brandon was already up, unnaturally cheerful. Coffee was on, eggs in the pan. "Morning, Marcus," he said brightly. "Sleep all right?" "Not bad," I lied. "When's Emily supposed to get here?" "She texted," he said, not quite meeting my eye. "Her shift ran long. Won't make it until later this afternoon. Thought we could do some ice fishing." Lake should be solid. Ice fishing on a frozen lake with a man I was increasingly sure wanted me dead. "I'll pass for now," I said. "Hips bothering me. Think I'll just read." He forced a smile. "Suit yourself." After breakfast, he announced he needed to run into town for a couple of things, a good 40 minutes away on winter roads. "You'll be okay here alone?" he asked. "I managed 36 years chasing criminals." I said, "I can handle a cottage." As soon as his truck disappeared down the road, I checked the landline. Dead. Not from old age. The cord behind the desk had been neatly cut. I went straight to his bag. At the bottom, under clothes and toiletries, was a file folder. Inside were documents, a mortgage on a commercial property in Winnipeg, taken out 3 months earlier for $1.2 million. Several pages of cash advance slips from a casino, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Letters from collection agencies. A foreclosure notice. Brandon wasn't just in trouble. He was drowning. At the back of the folder, my stomach turned. Life insurance paperwork. My policy. The one Margaret and I took out years ago. Originally, the beneficiary had been Margaret. After she died, I'd changed it to Emily, at least. I thought I had, according to these documents. The beneficiary had been changed again 6 months ago. To Brandon. My hands went cold. My signature was on the forms. Or rather, a convincing copy of my signature. Fraud, plain and simple. I put the papers back exactly where I'd found them. Took a few steadying breaths, then grabbed my phone and went outside. I walked up the road until I caught a single bar of signal and snapped several photos, the sawed stare from multiple angles. The cut phone cord, the insurance documents. Then I went back inside, put his bag back, and sat by the fire with a book. Waiting. By the time Brandon returned, my plan had shifted. I wasn't going to accuse him, not yet. I needed him to show his hand. "Hey, Marcus," he said too casually. "Town was a zoo. How about that fishing now?" "Actually," I said, "I've been thinking about your investment idea." "Tell me more about it." For the next hour, he gave me a polished pitch. Locations, renderings, imaginary partners, locked-in returns. None of it fit the reality I'd seen in that folder. It was an elaborate fantasy built on quicksand. When he finally paused for breath, I said, "It's interesting, but I'd need to see the actual paperwork. Talk to your partners. Look at the numbers." His face tightened. "There isn't time for all that. I told you this is a limited window." "Then maybe I'm not your guy?" I said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You never liked me," he said quietly. "You've never thought I was good enough for Emily." "This isn't about—" "Save it," he snapped. He took a step closer, voice dropping. "You know what your problem is, Marcus? You think being some retired cop makes you smarter than everyone else. But you couldn't even save your wife." The words hit me like a punch, but I kept my face still. "I think you should leave," I said. "Leave?" He laughed once, humorless. "We're in the middle of nowhere. It's my truck. Emily's not coming. I told her we needed man time this weekend. She thinks we're bonding." He smiled then, and there was nothing human in it. "I told you I need that money," he said softly. "And I'm going to get it, one way or another." He took another step. Training took over. I shifted my stance subtly, weight balanced, ready. "This is your last chance," I warned. "Walk out that door now. We talk about this tomorrow with Emily here. Otherwise, you're going to regret it." "Kill you?" he said, mocking. "Of course not. You're going to have an unfortunate accident." Those old stares, Maybe a fall on the ice. Maybe your blood pressure acts up without your meds. He reached into his pocket and held up a familiar pill bottle. My medication. Oops, he said. Must have dropped this. Then he lunged. For a man who spends his life sitting at a desk, he was fast. His shoulder slammed into my chest, driving the air from my lungs. I managed to twist, but his fist caught me square in the ribs. I heard something crack and went down hard. He was on me in an instant. Hands at my throat, squeezing black dots filled my vision. The room narrowed into a tunnel. I clawed at his wrists, felt nothing but solid muscle, and panicked. This is it, I thought. This is how I go. Choked out on the floor of the cottage I built with my wife. Then, through the fog, a single memory pushed through. Margaret's voice years ago. I'm keeping a gun at the cottage, she'd said. I don't care what your training says. I want something in that nightstand if someone ever breaks in. The .38 revolver. In the bedroom, I drove my knee up as hard as I could. Caught him in the groin. His grip loosened as he gasped. I twisted, rolled, and somehow managed to scramble to my feet, half stumbling toward the bedroom, lungs burning. Ribs screaming, he swore and came after me. The nightstand drawer stuck for half a second. Then it gave. The revolver was right where she'd left it, loaded. I spun around, gun in both hands. Back off. I rasped. Brandon froze. You're not going to shoot me, he said, breathless but smug. You're Mr. Law and Order, and what would you tell Emily? I'll tell her the truth, I said. That I chose living over letting her husband beat and strangle me to death for insurance money. I kept the gun on him as I backed us into the living room. Sit, I ordered. Pointing at a sturdy wooden chair, he sat, hands on the armrests. I grabbed a roll of electrical tape from the junk drawer and wrapped his wrists and ankles tightly. It wasn't pretty, but it would do. You can't keep me here, he said, trying to sound confident. Emily will come looking. The landline's cut. There's no cell service. She won't worry until tomorrow, I said. By then, the RCMP will have you in cuffs. His eyes flickered. You haven't called them? Before you got back from town, I lied. I walked up the road and texted my old partner. Told him something was wrong. I hadn't, but he didn't know that. You can't prove anything, he said again. Weaker this time, I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos of the stair, the saw marks, the cut phone cable. Then I said, I also saw what was in your bag. The foreclosure, the casino slips, the life insurance papers with my forged signature. That alone gets you fraud charges. I didn't mean you meant every bit of it, I said. We sat like that for hours. Him taped to the chair. Me sitting across from him, gun on my lap, every breath a jolt of pain through my ribs. As the light faded, headlights swept across the cottage walls. The front door opened. Dad? Emily, she stepped inside, took in the scene in one glance, me bruised and battered, gun in hand. Brandon bound to the chair and went pale. What happened? She whispered. Sit down, Em, I said softly. We need to talk. I walked her through everything. The investment pitch. The cut stair. The landline. The documents. The attack. The gun, with each piece. I watched her expression crack and reshape itself. Shock, denial, horror, betrayal. When I finished, she turned to Brandon. Is it true? She asked. He couldn't look at her. Listen, Answer the question, she said, voice shaking. Is it true? I got in over my head, he said. I was trying to fix things. For us. Your dad, he's old, he's alone. He doesn't need that kind of money. I was going to take care of you with it, I swear. She stared at him like he was a stranger. You tried to murder my father, she whispered. There's no version of that where you're doing it for us. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. No service here, I reminded her. We'll have to drive up the road? She looked at me, then at Brandon one more time. Something in her hardened. Let's go, she said. He can stay exactly where he is. Emily, Brandon pleaded, you can't just leave me like this. She looked at him with eyes I didn't recognize. Watch me. We drove until the signal bars returned. My old partner, now a constable at the local detachment, met us there. I gave a full statement, handed over the photos, explained where to find the folder in Brandon's bag. They picked him up a few hours later. The charges were heavy: attempted murder, fraud, forgery, assault causing bodily harm, which brings us back to Christmas, 3 weeks later. My ribs were still cracked, a galaxy of purple and yellow spread across my torso. Every laugh, every cough, every deep breath hurt, but I insisted on hosting Christmas dinner anyway. Emily needed some version of normal. Brandon, incredibly, was out on bail. His lawyer had argued he wasn't a flight risk. Emily had filed for divorce the day after his arrest, but paperwork takes time. Legally, they were still married. I want him there, she'd said, eyes red but determined. I need to say what I need to say with everyone there to hear it. I didn't like it, but she's my daughter. So I agreed. Now, sitting at the table, I watched him perform, laughing at jokes, pouring wine, acting like he'd been wronged. Like all this was some terrible misunderstanding. So, Marcus, he said finally, raising his glass again, that tight smile stretching across his face. Now that things have calmed down, when are you dropping those charges? I mean, come on. We're family. The whole table went quiet. Everyone looked at me. I set my fork down slowly, ignoring the pain. Is that what you're calling it? I asked. A misunderstanding? Dad, Emily started, but I held up a hand. You sabotaged my stairs, I said evenly. You cut the landline. You forged my signature on a life insurance policy and made yourself the beneficiary. When your accident plan didn't happen fast enough, you tried to beat and choke me to death on a living room floor. Brandon's jaw clenched. You can't prove. The RCMP has photos from my phone, I said. They have the saw. They have the documents from your bag. The hospital has my x-rays. 3 broken ribs. Bruising around my neck. Every mark you left on me is in my medical file. I lifted my shirt just enough to show the bruises. Gasps went around the table. I lowered it again and leaned forward. You didn't teach me a lesson, Brandon, I said quietly. You just proved what you are, a coward who tried to kill a 64-year-old man for money. And you still failed. He pushed his chair back, scraping the floor. I don't have to listen to this, he snapped. Emily, we're leaving. No, Emily said. He blinked. What? She wiped her eyes and looked up at him. No, Brandon. You're leaving, alone. There was steel in her voice I'd never heard before. The divorce papers are being served tomorrow, she said. My lawyer says with the charges, I'll get the house, the car, everything. You're going to prison. And when you get out, I won't be waiting. Neither will anyone at this table. Be serious, he scoffed. They won't even convict me. I'll fight this. I'll appeal. The Crown prosecutor thinks you're looking at 10 to 15 years, I said calmly. And trust me, inmates don't think much of people who target seniors. You'll have time to reflect. He looked around, searching for lies. No one met his eyes. He finally spat, You're all going to regret this, and stormed out. His car tore away down the street. No one spoke for a long moment. Then my brother Tom lifted his glass. To Marcus, he said simply. Still tougher than he looks. Emily laughed through tears and added, To Dad. We clinked glasses. My ribs protested. I didn't care. Brandon's trial is set for March. The evidence is overwhelming. His lawyer is already hinting at a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. If they need my testimony, I'll give it. But honestly, the photos, the paperwork, and the injuries tell the story just fine. I sold the cottage. I couldn't imagine going back there. Not with those memories layered over the happy ones with Margaret. The money went into a trust for Emily. Something clean, out of reach of anyone like him ever again. My ribs healed slowly. At my age, everything takes longer. But they did heal. I'm still here. Still breathing. Still getting up in the morning and making my own coffee. These days, I volunteer at a community center a couple times a week, teaching basic self-defense and safety awareness to seniors. Don't tell yourself you're helpless just because you're older, I say at the start of every class. You have instincts. You have experience. Listen to them. If what happened to me helps even one person set a boundary, ask a question, or walk away from someone dangerous, even if that someone is family, then maybe that weekend did more than just nearly kill me. Emily's healing too. Therapy, new routines, new plans. She told me once through tears that she felt guilty for bringing him into our lives. I told her what I truly believe. She loved someone who hid who he was. That's not a crime. What he did is, sometimes when the house is quiet, I think back to that moment on the cottage floor, his hands on my throat, the world going dark at the edges. I think about how close I came to never seeing another Christmas, never feeling my daughter's hand in mine, never getting another chance to just sit by a fire and breathe. Then in my mind I hear Margaret's voice. Dry, practical, no nonsense. You're alive, Marcus, she says. So stop replaying it and start living. So that's what I'm trying to do. One careful breath at a time, with a healed ribcage and a sharper awareness of how quickly life can tilt. Brandon thought being 64 made me weak. He thought his desperation and his plan were enough to beat me. He forgot one simple thing. You don't spend 36 years catching criminals and learn nothing. He wanted to teach me a lesson about age and power. In the end, he's the one who learned. He'll have a decade or more behind bars to think about the day he tried to kill an old cop and failed.